Bela Guttmann's curse still haunts Portugal's biggest clubs today. The true engine of a historic sports curse is never mystical intervention, cosmic alignment, or the whims of a vengeful deity, but rather the desperate human need to externalize a devastating, self-inflicted corporate mistake that a franchise is too proud to admit. By attributing decades of failure to an invisible, supernatural force, front offices cleverly shift the blame away from their own catastrophic mismanagement, transforming their errors into legendary tragedies. This psychological sleight of hand allows organizations to preserve their commercial appeal, while their fans suffer. This psychological armor shields wealthy owners from the fury of thousands of betrayed fans who demand an explanation for sudden, inexplicable collapses on the field. When a team repeatedly falters at the absolute threshold of victory, it is far easier for the collective consciousness to believe in a haunted stadium than to acknowledge that their beloved heroes are simply buckling under the immense, crushing weight of their own manufactured anxiety. We build monuments to our losses, transforming simple bad luck into an elaborate, inescapable fate. These manufactured narratives eventually take on a terrifying life of their own, transforming simple administrative incompetence into an untouchable, ghostly entity that actively paralyzes future generations of athletes. By looking closely at the moments these curses were born, we find that every single legendary hex began not with a witch's spell, but with a pen, a contract, and a single prideful decision. The trap is laid for the next 80 years. On December 26, 1919, Boston Red Sox owner Harry Frazee sat in his wood-paneled office and signed a contract that sold George Herman, Babe Ruth, to the rival New York Yankees, for a modest sum of cash. The common historical textbook tells us that Frazee did this solely to finance a theatrical play, but the cold financial reality reveals a far more desperate truth. Frazee was drowning in massive personal debt, facing foreclosure on Fenway Park itself. This single, panic-driven transaction did not just transfer a legendary home run hitter, it instantly shattered the psychological foundation of the Boston franchise, leaving a roster of bewildered players. The resulting decades of failure were not the work of a supernatural hex, but the direct consequence of a gutted farm system and a locker room permanently poisoned by the knowledge that excellence would always be traded away for quick cash to satisfy Wall Street creditors. The players did not just lose games, they lost their sense of competitive agency, operating under the assumption that some higher power had already decided their fate before the first pitch was ever thrown. As the decades rolled on, the Red Sox repeatedly reached the precipice of championship glory, only to suffer bizarre, catastrophic collapses that seemed to defy physical probability. Each of these heartbreaking moments was instantly blamed on the curse of the Bambino, a convenient myth that successfully distracted the public from the front office's persistent failure to build a modern, racially integrated roster during the crucial decades of the mid-20th century. By focusing the public's attention on the ghost of Babe Ruth, the ownership successfully masked their own failure to adapt to a rapidly changing league. Yet, while Boston fans wept over their self-imposed ghost, an even darker, institutional curse was quietly taking root in the frozen coal country of Pennsylvania, born from an act of pure executive betrayal. This was not a curse born of a sold player, but of a stolen identity, engineered by a league president who decided that small-town grit had no place in his grand corporate vision, leaving one franchise permanently haunted by a stolen championship. In December of 1925, the Pottsville Maroons, a team of rugged blue-collar coal miners, clearly won the NFL championship on the field, only for league president Joseph Carr to abruptly suspend the franchise on a highly controversial scheduling technicality. Carr then arbitrarily awarded the title to the Chicago Cardinals, a struggling team owned by Chris O'Brien, who initially refused to accept the unearned trophy, out of sheer sporting shame and respect for the dominant Maroons. This administrative theft stripped a proud community of their rightful glory, leaving behind a bitter legacy of resentment that would slowly curdle into something far more toxic. The Cardinals' front office eventually relented, claiming the stolen championship as their own, an act of supreme hubris that local Pottsville residents warned would bring a century of athletic ruin upon the franchise. From that exact moment of stolen glory, the Cardinals embarked on the most statistically miserable run in professional sports history, migrating across the country while carrying a heavy, invisible anchor of constant defeat that no coach could ever hope to lift. It was as if the stolen trophy carried a silent, infectious poison, ensuring that no matter where the franchise traveled, they could never escape the shadow of their original sin. For nearly a century, the franchise endured draft busts, sudden injuries, and historically bad seasons, culminating in their lone, heartbreaking Super Bowl appearance in 2009, where victory slipped through their fingers in the final seconds. Players and coaches came and went, but the heavy, invisible anchor of the 1925 betrayal remained tied to their ankles, proving that some debts cannot be settled by moving to a new city or building a state-of-the-art stadium. Every critical fumble, every missed field goal, and every blown lead became a grim reminder of the debt that Pottsville had demanded so long ago. But while the Cardinals struggled to escape the dark ghost of a stolen trophy, a Chicago tavern owner was about to walk into Wrigley Field with a common farm animal, triggering a curse so potent and deeply internalized that it would eventually require a literal, public sacrifice to break. The world thought it was a joke, but the sheer psychological terror it inflicted on a city would culminate in an innocent fan requiring police protection for his own survival. On October 6, 1945, William Sionis, a Greek immigrant and owner of the Billy Goat Tavern, purchased 2 box seat tickets for Game 4 of the World Series at Wrigley Field, intending to bring his pet goat Murphy inside. When Cubs owner Philip K. Wrigley personally ordered Sionis and his foul-smelling companion to leave, Sionis threw his hands in the air and declared that the Cubs would never win another World Series because they insulted his goat. The stadium security laughed as they escorted him out, entirely unaware that this bizarre confrontation would soon become the most expensive mistake in Chicago baseball history. What began as a bizarre publicity stunt quickly mutated into a psychological prison for the Chicago Cubs, as decades of subsequent near misses and bizarre accidents convinced both players and fans that they were genuinely doomed. The team did not just lose, they lost in spectacular, agonizing fashions that seemed to actively validate Sionis's angry curse, creating an atmosphere of intense paranoia that hung over every single home game and paralyzed the roster. Every season became a slow-motion car crash, where the players did not just compete against their opponents, but against the suffocating expectation of their own inevitable doom. This collective anxiety reached a terrifying climax on October 14, 2003, during Game 6 of the National League Championship Series, when an ordinary fan named Steve Bartman instinctively reached for a foul ball, inadvertently disrupting a crucial catch. The entire stadium of 40,000 people instantly erupted in primal fury, projecting decades of cursed frustration onto a single, blameless man who had to be smuggled out of the ballpark in a disguise to escape the mob. The tragedy of that night was not the missed catch, but the sudden, terrifying realization that the curse had driven an entire city to the brink of madness. The Cubs' eventual triumph in 2016 finally shattered their agonizing 71-year nightmare, but across the Atlantic Ocean, an older, far more calculated curse was continuing to systematically destroy a European football giant with mathematical precision. This European curse did not rely on goats or baseballs, but on the cold, bitter words of a brilliant manager who knew exactly how to dismantle a club's confidence from the inside out, leaving them helpless. In the spring of 1962, Bela Guttmann had just guided Benfica to their second consecutive European Cup victory, cementing his status as one of the greatest tactical minds in the history of the sport. When he walked into the club's administrative offices to ask for a well-deserved financial bonus, the directors smugly dismissed his request, believing that the players, not the manager, were the sole reason for the team's historic success. They failed to realize that Guttmann was not just a coach but a psychological architect who had built the very foundation of their modern greatness. Guttmann resigned on the spot, uttering his famous decree that Benfica would not win another European final for 100 years, a statement that the directors initially laughed off as the theatrical ranting of an aging coach. However, the psychological weight of his words began to press down on the club almost immediately, transforming their confident European campaigns into a series of tragic, late-game collapses that defied all logical explanation. What they dismissed as an empty threat slowly transformed into a heavy, invisible fog that rolled over the pitch every time Benfica reached a major European stage. Over the next 6 decades, Benfica reached 8 major European finals, 5 in the European Cup and 3 in the UEFA Cup, and lost every single one of them, often to vastly inferior opponents under highly improbable circumstances. Even when the legendary Eusebio went to Guttmann's grave in Vienna in 1990 to pray for forgiveness and beg for the curse to be lifted, the invisible chains remained completely unbroken, proving that Guttmann's psychological hex was woven directly into the club's identity. The flowers laid at Guttmann's grave withered, but the cold, mathematical precision of his curse remained entirely untouched by time. As the years slowly tick toward the year 2062, the football world is left to wonder if Benfica's continuous European heartbreak is merely a massive statistical anomaly, or if Guttmann successfully discovered a way to permanently hack the human mind under extreme pressure. The true horror of his words lies not in their supernatural power but in their ability to make elite athletes doubt their own greatness at the exact moment they need it most. When we strip away the romantic folklore of goats, sold legends and angry managers, we find that sports curses are actually highly effective psychological weapons that teams unwittingly turn upon themselves. The moment a franchise accepts the narrative of a curse, they provide their players with a pre-packaged excuse for failure, subtly lowering the standards of accountability across the entire organization, and allowing mediocrity to fester under the guise of tragedy. It is a brilliant coping mechanism that transforms the embarrassment of failure into a grand, tragic destiny. In the high-stakes arena of professional sports, where the thin margin between legendary victory and devastating defeat is measured in mere milliseconds and inches, any mental distraction can be fatal. A player who secretly believes he is destined to lose because of an invisible hex will inevitably hesitate, tighten up, or make a critical error when the pressure reaches its boiling point, thereby fulfilling the very prophecy he desperately fears. The curse does not act upon the ball, it acts upon the synapses of the human brain, slowing the hand and clouding the vision at the exact moment of truth. This means that the true authors of these curses are not the eccentric characters who originally uttered them, but the millions of passionate believers who actively kept them alive through decades of collective anxiety. By constantly talking about the curse, dissecting its history, and expecting it to strike at any moment, the fans and the media create a toxic, self-reinforcing loop of despair that becomes virtually impossible for new players to escape. They breathe life into the ghost, feeding it with their doubts and fears, until it becomes heavy enough to crush the strongest of athletes. Perhaps the ultimate mystery is not whether these curses possess some form of supernatural reality, but why we as humans are so desperate to believe in them in the first place, clinging to the comforting fantasy of a cosmic enemy, rather than accepting the far more terrifying reality of our own fragile minds under pressure. We construct these myths because it is far easier to fight a ghost than to look in the mirror and confront our own deepest insecurities. We would rather be ruled by angry gods than admit that we are simply not good enough to win. As Benfica continues its march toward the year 2062, still locked in Bela Guttmann's icy grip, we must ask ourselves, is a sports curse a genuine psychological virus that can infect an entire franchise? Or is it simply the ultimate excuse we invent to make our failures feel poetic?